background on why we are having our problem. Our refrigerator is in our garage, and the garage temperature in the wintertime gets below about 55 degrees Fahrenheit frequently. In fact, sometimes a lot below it. And when that happens, the freezer will not remain cold enough. It will get too warm, and the ice cream and things in the refrigerator will get soft, and it's unsafe. And the reason for that is there is really no temperature control in the electronic temperature control in the freezer. This control that you see here to adjust the coldness level or the temperature of the freezer is nothing more than just a little flapper valve. See these louvers? It just allows the cold air that the refrigerator is producing. It admits more or less of that cold air to the freezer to maintain the freezer temperature. The only thermostatic control that makes the air conditioner run or not run to cool is here in the refrigerator section, and it's within this plastic housing that we're going to take off and install our garage kit or our heater kit. It is essentially a heater that lays on the bottom of this compartment near the what's called the cold control. It's the little electronic brain of the refrigerator to make that cold control run more frequently regardless of the temperature, so that we are able to keep the freezer at a proper freezer temperature even if the environment of the refrigerator is so close to the refrigerator temperature that the refrigerator otherwise would not run or cool often enough to maintain the very low temperature of this freezer. So this is our task, and we're going to show you how to do it. Okay, so here is our kit that we're going to install. It's basically just a heater that you can see here. And we're going to plug this into that housing that we showed you earlier. It's called a low ambient temperature or garage kit. The tools that you will need are a 1/4 inch nut driver, okay, there's that, and a Phillips screwdriver, there's that. So moving on to step 1. Okay, step 1, and the first thing that we want to do prior to working on anything with the refrigerator is to unplug it, totally remove power. So here we go. So step 2 is to remove the 4 screws holding the control box to the cabinet. These screws are removed with the 1/4 inch nut driver. Two of them are in the rear, here, here. 2 of them are in the front, here and here. I have a little magnetic tray to hold my screws so that I don't lose them, and that is sometimes helpful. So here we go to remove the plastic housing. I'm going to remove the rear screws first because there's a little pin on the back of this unit that will hold it in the back from dropping down. One. remove the front ones. Notice that as I remove these front ones now, I'm supporting the weight of this housing so that it doesn't fall and cause us any problems with our electrical wire. Okay, now as I let this down from the front, there's a pin holding this into the back of the refrigerator. So before I completely remove it, this is called a Molex connector, and it connects the cold control to the power for the refrigerator. So do you see these little tabs that I'm pushing in, the bottom section of them? That latches this connector. So I'm going to push the bottom of these toward the connector itself in order to unlatch it, and you can see it unlatching here and here. As I do so, then I can, while gently wiggling it to and fro, I can remove this without breaking it. Okay, now as we remove the back of it, see this little pin that goes into this hole that supported the weight of that to make that easy for me to work with it. Here's the pin, and here's the hole. Okay, so a little orienting ourselves. Here is the housing that we removed from the ceiling of the refrigerator, and here's what you see at the front of that housing when it's mounted. This is how you adjust the temperature of your refrigerator, either colder or warmer. And here's what's inside. This knob that you adjust, you can see that it's connected to this unit, which is the electronic brain of the refrigerator, called the cold control. And this cold control is what we're going to plug this little heating blanket unit into, using these two connections right here. But first, so that we can place our heating element underneath this unit, which is the freezer defroster timer, we're going to take these two screws, 1, 2, out, so that we can lift this up for easier access to the floor, if you will, area of this housing, because we're going to remove this paper off of the adhesive backing and basically stick this underneath the defroster timer. Okay, so let's take our Phillips head screwdriver and remove these two screws so that we can lift our defroster timer out of our way. Now, because I have this turned over, I would have to turn this housing over and possibly play a game called Find the Screw That Fell on the Ground. But I have a secret weapon, and that is this little magnetic thingamajig that I can get my screws with and put them in my magnetic tray. So I am going to use that. We are going to take this now. This is kind of a surprise tool, but it comes in handy. Okay, so now let's place and adhere our heating element to the bottom of our housing. Here's our defroster timer, and we're going to just simply move it out of the way, and without removing the paper, we're going to kind of pre-fit this heater element. And see these two posts that the screws attach the defroster timer onto the housing with? Okay, there are two holes in the heater here. This hole lines up with this opening, I guess to admit air for ventilation or drain. But in any event, we're going to line these two holes up with these two posts and then kind of press it into its final form to make it easier once we remove the adhesive backing to get it into position. So as you can see, it kind of bends into a U shape here, and those two holes are aligned with the two mounting posts, defroster mounting posts, and the third center hole is aligned with this hole in the bottom of the housing itself. Okay, here we go. Now we're going to take the adhesive paper backing off to expose our adhesive on our heating element, and we're going to place our heating element. And let's see, these wires here, I guess I will start by kind of threading this under these wires before I allow it to touch the bottom of the housing very much. And then I'm going to start on the center and work outward from the center, just pressing it down to allow the adhesive to stick. Not a whole lot of rocket science to it, but we're pressing it down and allowing it to stick to the housing. And here we go. And hopefully yours will be at least as neat as this, probably better, but there's the heater installed on the bottom of the housing. Now we're going to connect it. Now we're going to place our defrost timer back into position. See, here are the holes for the screws, or the inside holes of the screws, and here are the posts, 1, 2. So we're going to line up these two screw holes with these two posts and just place it back in the position that it was. Then we're going to get our Phillips head screws and we're going to reattach that. So let's put one of them in there and get our screwdriver and start that. And we'll wait to get it tight until we get them both started. And here's our second one. Put that Phillips head screw in there. Get our screwdriver. Start that one. And now that we have it lined up, we can kind of tighten it up. But remember that you're tightening a metal screw into a plastic housing, so you want it snug, but if you make it too tight, it could break the plastic. So be sure to just make it snug, but don't over tighten it, because we're wanting to fix a problem, not break something and create another problem. So anyway, there we go. So our defroster housing is back in position. We check it to make sure it's lined up. Okay, that phase is done. Okay, the next phase of our project is to unplug these two leads, 1, 2, from the cold control. So this one has an orange wire. So I'm going to support the cold control with my left hand and wiggle these off. Try to gently wiggle these off with my right hand. Now, as you can tell, this is not easy to do, and so I'm trying to support the cold control unit so that I don't break anything while I'm applying enough force to rock this connector off of the cold control. And to use something like pliers might be an option, but I wouldn't try it because I would be afraid the force of the pliers would break this plastic connector. So we've got the orange one off, so let's go for the black one. Black one meaning this forward one has the black wires, the one that's farther into or aft in the housing has the orange wire. So orange and black. Trying to find a way to get my hand in there and gently rock this thing back and forth, just using finger pressure so that I don't break the little plastic connector. Okay, so now we're going to plug our two wires, our black wire and our orange wire, that are attached to our heater element, and we're going to piggyback these two wires on the wires to the cold control. The orange one goes toward the back or farther in. The black one goes forward or closest to the front of the ceiling of the refrigerator, or closest to the door. Okay, black one closest to the refrigerator door, orange one closest to the back wall of the refrigerator. So let's keep those in mind. Now, the first one that the instructions say to install is the orange heater lead. So here's the orange heater lead, and here is the orange wire to the cold control. And what they mean by piggyback is you can see that this has a little tab on it, and we're going to plug this orange wire from the cold control into this tab, and we'll see how that goes. This is no rehearsal here. We'll just see how it goes. Okay, there we go. So we have that installed, and now we're going to plug this black part of this assembly that we've just made back into the cold control. And here we go. Let's see how that'll work. Get it lined up good. Okay, so that's reinstalled, reconnected to the cold control. Alright, now we're going to do the same thing with the black wire. And we'll just thread this under here. We're going to do the same thing to the black wire. Here's the black wire that goes to the cold control. Here's the black wire from the heater. And we're going to plug that in. Using that little piggyback tab. Oop. There we go. Okay, so we've got that plugged in. And now we're going to plug this one in. I think we're going to do this a different way. So I think what we will do is move this under this orange wire, and we may have an easier time attaching it afterwards. So here's the tab of the black heater wire, and it's going into the black connector for the cold control. Now we've got that. Now let's try to line this up and get it reattached. And I've got big hands, so and I'm supporting the cold control as I try to manipulate this and push it on so that I don't put a lot of stress on these space age plastics that we have here. I'm not going to lie to you, it's kind of finicky to get this in position to make it work, but there it went. It just went on. Okay, and you just have to, as gently as possible, try to line up all the elements of this so that you can slide that on to the cold control tab. Okay, so here we are, orange piggybacked onto the orange cable, and then the black insulated part of this assembly is plugged back into the cold control. Black piggybacked onto the black wire that goes on this front or closest to the door tab of the cold control, and then the black insulated part plugged back into the cold control. So we pull on these slightly to make sure that they're secure, that we've got them on tight, and we'll move on to the next phase, which is to reattach this Molex connector and reinstall the entire housing. Okay, here we are on the final phase of our project. This pin here, it's called a pin, dowel, is going to go in that hole back there in order to support the rear of this, and then we're going to reinstall our 4 screws that holds this housing up onto the ceiling of the refrigerator. But what we're going to do in sequence is we're going to put this pin in the hole to support the rear of this housing. Then we're going to plug in our Molex connector into this receptacle. Then we're going to place our 4 screws. So here we go. Okay, here's the pin in the hole supporting the rear of the unit. We plug in the Molex connector, and see these little arms that I'm unlatching by squeezing the bottom of them. They are to the left and the right side of this thing. Okay, so we line this up. And it appears that it will only go on one way. So if I try to plug it in where it's oriented back to front, it won't go in. But when I turn it 180 degrees, then it will go in. So I've pushed it in until I see both of these left and right latches latch and hold this securely. And I gently pull on it and it's secure. So now we're going to try to line up our screw holes. And something that would be good would be if you had a screwdriver with a magnetic head on it. I'm sorry, a nut driver with a magnetic head on it might make this a little bit easier, but I'm just going to try to freestyle it here. So here we have our 4 1/4-inch screws replaced here and here, and here, and on the other side in the same place. And the same cautions when you're installing these screws. It's kind of finicky to get them started. You may have to adjust the angle with your driver a little bit and go slow. Turn them counterclockwise first once you sort of find the hole, and then turn carefully clockwise until you're sure that you have the screw engaged in the hole and it's not going in at some unusual angle, because once again the caution is that we're installing metal screws into plastic receptacles. So once you get the screws turned in, you want for them to be snug, but you definitely don't want to go so tight that you break the plastic that you're screwing into, or this plastic housing. So just be careful in that regard and you'll be fine. Snug, good. Too tight, bad. Alright, and just one last check. Once we've reinstalled our housing, I placed the thermostat control here on the recommended setting just to get it started. Same way on the slider in the freezer section that says okay, and in the freezer, those 2 dots on either side of this sliding control, they are the recommended setting. So I place this slider on the recommended setting, and then we're going to walk over here. And so now, final task, don't forget, we're going to plug our refrigerator back into the wall. And here we go. Now we can hear the refrigerator running, and hopefully from here on out our refrigerator and freezer will cool just fine.